Hello and good afternoon, Facebook family and friends. Pastor Robert here with today's edition of the Parsons Study, a twice weekly devotional broadcast here on Facebook Live. You can also find it here on video or on our church's channel at YouTube. I would appreciate it if you would like or follow us here on Facebook or become a subscriber of ours on YouTube, either at Glade Spring Baptist Church or the Parsons Study. This morning I wanted us to take a look at just a couple of verses in Matthew chapter 16. Matthew chapter 16, if you want to turn there or make a note of it, verses 1 through 4. So let me begin by reading that, Matthew 16, verses 1 through 4, and as usual, I'm reading from the English Standard Version, ESV, translation of the Bible. And the Pharisees and Sadducees came, and to test him, that's speaking of Jesus, to test Jesus, they asked him to show them a sign from heaven. He answered them, "When it is evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning it will be stormy today, for the sky is red and threatening. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it, except the sign of Jonah." So he left them and departed. You know, we still hear about signs of the times, and there's one particular saying, the origins of which was in a play by Shakespeare. It was actually The Tempest, and in that play, one of the characters makes the statement that misery makes strange bedfellows. The way we usually hear that today is that politics makes strange bedfellows, and it seems that's exactly what's going on here in this passage of scriptures. The Sadducees and the Pharisees were two different groups of Jewish leaders in Jesus' time, and they really never did see eye to eye about anything. They had different beliefs, they had different goals. One was more concerned about preserving the faith, the other was more concerned about preserving their power, and here are these two vastly different groups suddenly coming together, but what has united them is simply their disbelief of Christ, their dislike of Christ. And here they weren't questioning, looking for a sign that they might believe Christ was the Son of God. Rather, they were testing him, trying to discredit him, trying to prove he was not who he said he was. So they asked for a sign. Give us something big, something miraculous that will prove to us once and for all you are truly the Son of God. Now this comes just after Christ has fed the 4,000 with 5 fish and 2 loaves. So what more sign could they want? And Christ has been performing other miracles all over the countryside. But Christ wasn't interested in just putting on a sideshow. He wasn't interested in just performing a miracle to put on a show. Generally, when he did something miraculous, it was always to help somebody. He fed the 4,000 simply because they were hungry. He gave sight to the blind because it would help their lives. So Christ wasn't interested in just putting on some kind of magic sideshow. He already knew no matter the kind of sign that he might give or how spectacular it might be, that no one was going to believe him, or at least these people weren't going to believe him anyway. So he tells them, you know, you can interpret the weather okay. And that's a saying that we still use even today. Red skies at night, sailors delight. Red skies in morning, sailors take warning. We still use that. Christ was saying, you know how to interpret the weather actually, and yet you cannot even interpret what is standing right in front of you. Jesus went on to say, "You're seeking a sign only because you were part of an evil and adulterous generation." They weren't looking for a reason to believe. They were looking for a reason to continue their disbelief. And then Christ said something odd. He said, "No sign will be given to this generation except the sign of Jonah." What did he mean by that? The sign of Jonah? Jesus never said. He never went on to explain. He just left and walked away. A lot of people believe that Christ was pointing ahead to the time of his resurrection, that if after 3 days in the ground, 3 days in the belly of the earth, if you will, that he would be resurrected just as Jonah was spit out of the belly of the big fish after 3 days. So a lot of people interpret that Christ was speaking of this yet future event that would come, and maybe that is what Christ meant. After all, he did not give an explanation. But if we go back and look at the story of Jonah, which is recounted in the book of Jonah, God had called Jonah to be a prophet, to go to the great city of Nineveh, capital of Assyria, and to warn them that the city was about to be destroyed if they did not repent. Well, Jonah didn't want to go, so he went to sea to try and escape, and the storm came upon the ship, and he was cast overboard and was swallowed by the great fish, we're told. And after 3 days, he prayed that God would deliver him, and God did. The big fish vomited him out, we're told, onto the land, and Jonah relented. Then he went on to Nineveh to warn the people. But when we look back at that story, Jonah never said anything to the people in Nineveh about having been swallowed by this fish. He never told them the first thing about this harrowing adventure he had just experienced to get to them. He simply went as a messenger of God with the message of God. What was the sign of Jonah? I believe it was quite simply, "I am the messenger of God, and I am here to deliver a message." I think that's what Christ was saying. It wasn't so much about the resurrection. It was, "I am the messenger of God, and this is his message, and what more proof would you need?" I think that's what Christ was telling the Pharisees and the Sadducees. What more proof do you need? And I hate to read all of this, but I don't want to forget any of it. As one commentator wrote, what Christ was saying, "In me, you are confronted with God and with the truth of God." What more could you possibly need? But you're so blind you cannot see it. There is truth and there is warning here. Jesus Christ is God's last word. Beyond him, the revelation of God cannot go. Here is God plain for all to see. Here is God's message plain for all to hear. Here is God's sign to the world. It is the warning truth that if Jesus cannot appeal to men and women, nothing can. No one else can. If Jesus cannot convince them, no one can. If men and women cannot see God in Jesus, they cannot see God in anything or anyone. When we are confronted with Jesus Christ, we are confronted with God's final word and God's ultimate appeal. If that is so, what can be left for those that throw away this last chance, who refuse to listen to that last word, who reject that last appeal? And so many today are still looking for a sign. God, show me some great sign that I might believe. But God's already given us that sign. That sign was Jesus Christ. For those that are seeking so that they might believe him, the evidence is already there. The evidence is already plain to see. But for those that are seeking some sign, some proof to continue not believing, no sign will ever be enough. Christ said, "I am here. My life is representative of God. What more could you need? I have come to you in person. So if you're listening today and you're not already a believer, I hope you will take a long, hard look at the evidence that already exists. If you are a believer, I think you have chosen wisely, but if you are not, I challenge you, take a look at the evidence that already exists, the evidence that is plain to see, the authenticity of the Bible, the evidence for the historical existence of Christ, and just the realization of how much this man, Jesus, and the story of his life have changed the world over 2,000 years and continues to change it even today. Over 2,000 years, just this one man, the change that he has caused. As Christ might have thought when he was talking to those Jewish leaders that day, how much more evidence do you need? So, I hope you'll be blessed by this message. If you'd like to continue the discussion, I'd love to hear from you. You can message me here on Facebook. I'd love to talk with you, particularly if you are seeking. For those that believe, keep the faith and have a blessed day. I trust you will be blessed in the Lord and blessed by this message. Join us again on Thursday at noon at the Parsons Study. Thank you.